Hello and good afternoon. It's Tuesday, March 1st, 2011, Harp Tuesday, and I haven't gone missing. I was out of town, and then unfortunately I got some sort of flu or bug or something, and so this last week I've just been fighting that, and so there wasn't an episode last week. But feeling a lot better, and wanted to get back into the swing of things and do a short Harp Tuesday episode this week. So this week I'm going to be talking about wrist and arm movement. And this is something that, you know, when you first start learning the harp, we're just concentrating on a good hand position. Fingers and hand position, a nice closing of the hand and making sure everything's working correctly that way, that, you know, that you're set up well, and that you're closing the fingers right into the palms, and the finger position is right. So that's what we're looking at to begin with. But then, after you get a little bit familiar with playing the harp, then we introduce this wrist movement. And I can't remember if I talked about it, but there's this little exercise, right? If you're resting your arms on your legs, for example, and just practicing closing the hands, but also moving the wrist, this movement of the wrist coming up and away and just bouncing up a little bit. And what we do is if we're connecting, for example, I talked about connecting. If we're connecting fingers, you know, we play the first one normally. But the last one, when we're actually coming off a string, when we're getting to the point where after we play this note, we're not going to have any fingers connected to the strings, we do this little wrist movement. And you might have seen me doing that in some of these earlier videos. I was trying to, when I was looking at basic beginning stuff, I was trying not to do too much of that, but you may have noticed me doing it in some of them. So if we're playing a chord, again, we're coming off the string, so we're doing this. And I don't know how good this angle is, but hopefully you can see that there's this wrist movement. And it's just a gentle movement up with you know, the knuckles are coming up, the wrists moving up. So again, we don't do that if we're connecting, we're still on the string, and maybe we go back to connect again, but then we're going to come off, and we have that little wrist movement. So probably one of the best ways to practice it is just with a single note, just playing, the same closing of the hand that we've been working on, and then coming up and off the string, just that little wiggle, that little gentle wrist movement. So let me talk about why we do that. And there are sort of two basic reasons for it. The first has to do with getting us back on the string, with the position of the hand. If we just come off the string, close the fingers, we're not in a great position to replace and avoid buzzing, nicking some string that's still vibrating. Because we're coming from a low position, and it can be a little bit difficult to avoid nicking those strings. By coming away from the string and going up like this, we're ready to replace from above. To slide in and avoid nicking any of those strings that are still vibrating. So it gives us a good attack position to grab our next note or our next bunch of notes. So that's one of the reasons is to just set the hand position up to play the next bunch of strings. And the second reason is that it functions as a reminder for you to relax. And I've talked about being relaxed before, and that's how important. That's so important to be relaxed, and that's what enables you to play fast is because you're relaxed. And what this little wrist movement can serve to do then is a reminder that, oh, I'm not actually doing anything, right? I've come off the strings. I'm not playing. I can just relax. This is a great time to relax, and it can help sort of relax all these muscles because, if you're playing something fast in here and maybe you're getting a little bit tense, and of course you want to avoid doing that as well, but for a long extended passage, some tension can start to creep in to these muscles. And now we're coming off the string, we're not having to do anything right at that moment in time, and that physical movement of the wrist can be just a great release for the muscles that, oh, yes, that's right, nothing's happening right now, we can just relax. So that movement then, as I say, it works in terms of setting us up in a good position to play our next notes, and also is a reminder and is a physical way of relaxing. Now, obviously, it goes without saying that you don't want to be, forcing any sort of motion and creating tension by this. It should just be a gentle little bounce, a little bounce to the wrists. And again, you don't want to come back down at an extreme like this. You're still coming back down with that little tiny curve in the wrists as you set up to play, but just this little. So it's something that can be very strange when you first start trying that. It's kind of weird, but just practice that. Practice single notes. And take a piece that you know reasonably well, some piece that you've worked on, pretty well, and then go through that, and every time that you come off the strings, not when you're still connecting, but on that note when you come off, practice, go through that really slowly, this piece, go through it really slowly, and I'm coming off, and work on that little wrist movement. And of course you want it to get to the point where it's just automatic, where as soon as you come off, you're doing a little wrist movement. And of course, there may be at some point some passages where it's really fast and really not much of a wrist movement happens because you're getting ready to go and grab whatever next notes are happening. But especially in the beginning, you have a ton more time than you think. So go ahead and do this little wrist movement whenever you come off. And then at some point, once you've got that fairly in hand, when that's pretty good, there's also a gentle arm movement that happens. And that tends to happen, for example, let's say some nice big chords. I did the 4A, but something similar, some big. And in this, as well as this wrist movement, we're also doing a little bit of an arm movement. So it's a little bit of a, we're sort of swiveling as if our elbows were resting on a tabletop, and our arms are just raising, just rising up a little bit, so that. And this is something that is sort of stylistic. It's not, again, it can serve as a reminder to relax a little bit, but that's mainly the job of the wrists. And what this does is it is something that is visually that works visually. And of course, this is a more stylistic thing where you're going to run into some people who prefer something else. But to my mind, that just looks nice, and what it can do, it can trick the ear to a certain extent, because if we get if we're sort of staying here and it visually it looks somewhat stopped, and that can fool our ear into thinking that it's not its biggest sound, whereas when we get this rising motion, that helps the illusion that this sound is just rising, is just going on. Imagine, for example, you're right at the end of a piece, and maybe it's a very quiet note, but you want everything's led into the note, and you want to have that note just sustain for a while. By having some movement and some rising movement, a little bit of that can help fool us, or not even fool us, but it just helps us hear that note being sustained. And again, something, some big chord, that visual aspect can help make it sound bigger and richer. Yeah, so to my mind, stylistically, it just looks a lot nicer to have this rather than, say, or something where you're going down, or even just not much happening. It's nice to have that little bit of visual pull to help us hear this to help us hear the sound come out. And again, nothing extreme, not all shouting around or something, but just a little rising of the arms. So that's something to play around with as well. And again, these are things that you want to feel fairly confident in terms of your hand position and the closing action, that that's the most important thing. But once you're feeling somewhat confident with that, then you can start playing around with the wrist, which is very important, and then eventually with chords or something like that, just seeing how it feels to do a little bit of a rising motion with the arms. So hope you've enjoyed this. It's good to be back in the swing of things, and sometime fairly soon I'm hoping to do some more in-depth looks at concert pieces, because that's a lot of fun for me. And I guess I'll see you again next week. Cheers.